evening, all. Hopefully you can see me okay. If I'm sure someone will mention it if we can't. I'm Sean Slade. I'm one of the two co-heads of education at BTS Spark in North America. And we actually have the benefit of having our other co-head, Alyssa Gallagher, on our panel today, or on our expert discussion today. So you'll get to meet her as well. As you enter, please feel free to add your comments to the chat box. And also, there is a Q&A section as well. So if you have questions, please feel free to add them to the Q&A. And we will try, well, we'll definitely spend about 5, maybe 10 minutes at the end with some audience Q&A as well. So let's move on. Leading is learning is what we're talking about today. As you probably know as well, with Zoom, you're able to toggle the sidebar so you can either see the videos and or the slides really as much as you want. Yep, exactly. All right, so what are we talking about when we're talking about leading is learning? Myself and Alyssa Gallagher have an article coming out. I believe it's early next week in eSchool News, but it's really focusing on this topic around leading is learning. There used to be this idea that you had learning, and then you afterwards, once you'd learned the craft, once you'd learned what you had to do, you then went on to do the duties and the management of the leadership. And so it was almost this continuum or path from learning to leading. However, what we've been seeing, especially over the last couple of years, is that the idea and the style of leadership is changing. The focus of leadership is changing. The ability, the mindsets, what leaders have to do now is changing. And it's not just changing from what it was like in the past, that traditional leader, it tends to be changing consistently and constantly. And so the article that we put out, which we'll send you a link when it's up, and also today's topic is really looking at this idea of how leading is becoming part of learning and how learning is really becoming part of leading. And these two things really are the same. Now, for today, we have 3 outstanding voices to share with you. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today, or our voices, I should say. So, Ali Rodman, are you there, Ali?
I am, Sean. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you.
Not a problem. So, Ali, as you can see on the screen as well, is the founder and Chief Learning Officer of the Learning Loop. And Ali and I knew each other from ASCD days when she was an emerging leader and has now gone on to be a bona fide leader and a leader of leaders, which we could say as well. So welcome, Ali.
Thank you, Sean.
We also have another person who I met via ASCD, Pete Hall. Good to see you, Pete.
Oh, it's good to see you too. Thanks for having me on board.
Yeah. Well, where are you tuning in from today, Pete?
I'm in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
I'm in a conference room at the admin building at the school district that I'm working in this week.
Sounds luxurious.
Yeah, I should show you. We got water, mints. Yeah, we got it all.
You got it all, everything, and they've got you. What more do they need?
That's right.
Exactly. And we're going to talk about the books that each of these people have put out in a minute. But Pete, your most recent book is the Always Strive to Be a Better You, which is a different kind of book. So you can tell us about that in a minute.
Will do.
And last but not least, we have Alyssa Gallagher, who is also an author, also published previously with ASCD, and is my co-head of BTS Spark here in North America. and has a book coming out in May with Rosie Connor as well, Embracing Messy Leadership.
Hi, all.
Welcome to you, Alyssa.
Thanks. Excited to join Allie and Pete and yourself on this conversation.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, well, let's jump into it. I'm going to give each of you a bit of a time to talk about your book, so maybe a minute or two each, and then I'm going to sort of try and hopefully wrap that up to show why we brought the three of you together here. So, Allie, what about a quick spiel about what Still Learning is about?
Certainly, Sean. So this book, believe it or not, kind of has its origin story from the first one. So my book around personalized professional learning came out in 2019. And a number of leaders said, you know what, we would love to do this level of personalization, but we don't have the learning culture yet to get there. Can you help us develop some of that capacity at the individual, the team, and the systems level to help educators across our system, not just our students, develop those skills? So after digging into a lot of that work, and really thinking about what this looks like from an andragogical perspective, right? We talk a lot about how to build effective learning environments and learning cultures with our students, but what does that mean for the adults in our system? I eventually kind of came to this place where we had 5 disciplines that were really resonating for folks in order to promote that social emotional learning for adults. And ironically, as this book was being constructed, we were also in the middle of the pandemic. So as I'm sure you can imagine, those disciplines and concepts continued to evolve. But it's been really exciting to dig in with educators across the system and really think about how do we get to know ourselves as learners? How do we set really intentional goals? And then how do we develop stronger team dynamics so that not only are we modeling that constant learning for our students, we're embracing those moments of stillness and valuing the reflection that's so important in this work as well.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think many people can probably already recognize why we, as you speak, why we invite you in as well. That focus around developing teams, about developing self, and constant learning definitely relate back to our topic. Pete, why don't we jump in and hear about Always Strive to Be a Better You, which, as I preluded to, is a bit of a different book from you.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be any fun if we wrote the same book over
That's
and over
true.
again, right? So Always Strive to Be a Better You is a book about the personal journey to figure out how you can live a better life. I mean, that's probably the simplest way that I could explain it. We all have, goals and ambitions and things that we want to accomplish in life. And there's always this thought that we want something better. I like to call it the pursuit of So bigger, better, faster, stronger, wealthier, more peaceful, have a greater impact, whatever it is, it's one step further from where you are. And it's this idea of continuous growth. And what I've loved about this particular book, and you said it's a different book, it's not Pete writing about the things that you need to do to live a better life. I actually corralled 7 people that I have known over the course of my life that are regular, ordinary people, nothing necessarily special about them as far as their DNA or their genetics or anything. They're just regular people like you, like me. And I've extracted from them what they have done and the way that they approach their lives and the way that they think and they act and they do that has led them to a place where they live a rather extraordinary existence in one way or another. And I've dissected those lessons and I share those lessons through their stories. So it's the exploration of 7 regular people that cues us into ways that we can live in the words of Plato, a happier, healthier, more noble life together. So I'm excited to have been able to do that. It kind of very similar along the lines of what Allie was saying, just with a wider lens on how we approach something. In this case, it's life and whatever it is in life that we want to get better at.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, interesting. It sounds a bit like the Olympic motto as well, sort of higher, faster, stronger. So it's getting all those ers. So
A lot of ers.
Maybe we'll see you in Paris as well in July. What do you think, Pete?
Yeah, if there's a lower podium that I could stand on, absolutely.
All right. And as we mentioned, we also have a book coming out from ASCD and BTS as well. embracing messy leadership, what we learned from 20,000 school leaders. Alyssa, do you want to give a quick outline of this?
Yeah, I do. I love, first of all, Sean, thank you. I love this idea, like seeing our books as Venn diagrams. There's so much overlap, right? This idea of leading and learning. But Pete, really quick, when you were saying faster, stronger, bigger, better, all I can hear is like the Daft Punk song in my head. Anyone else? Anyone else? I'll have to play
that
that
wasn't the
for you.
intent. However, I think we should all have a
Um,
soundtrack, and maybe that's your walk-up song.
maybe
There
that's
you
my
go.
walk-up song. All right. So embracing messy leadership. Yeah, this book is a little bit different. It's a lot of times, and as an author, I've written books that include educator perspective or my experience. This book is really unique because what we were able to do, I co-authored with Rosie Connor, who is our global director at BTS Spark. And we sort of had this aha moment of, we've coached over 20,000 school and district leaders globally, which means on the back end, we have anonymous coaching notes. We don't associate the note with who the leader is that's being coached, but we're able to look at both the coaching notes and the leadership shift that each leader being coached wants to make. So, when a leader goes into coaching, they're really looking at what's the growth area? What's the shift or the development area that they want to make? Now, this is very individual, right? This sits outside of a district. This sits outside of, this is a confidential space. They're working one-on-one with a leadership development coach. So these conversations, they're real, they're honest, they're raw. And we were able to analyze this data to identify what are the biggest challenges that leaders face. We also went in with some research questions like, are there global differences? Are there gender differences? What are the biggest challenges leaders are facing? And then essentially, what are the tools that our leadership coaches using in these sessions to help mitigate these challenges? And so in this, we've established a framework, a leadership framework that's very aspirational, really kind of capturing the messiness of leaderships, of school leadership in particular, and what leaders are experiencing on a day-to-day in their leadership.
Fantastic. And that'll be out when? May?
That will be out, published May 2024. Exact date still to be determined.
Okay, fantastic. So watch out for streamers and balloons and celebrations when that happens. And so I suppose you're all asking, it's obvious, I think, a little bit from what people were talking about in how these things overlap, but to make it more definitive, we drew this as a Venn diagram because there is this intersection, this point of connection. And the way that I see it and the way that it relates back to today's chat is really that it's that relationship between leading and learning, whether you're leading a team, whether you're leading a school or an organization, or whether you're leading yourself and wanting to grow yourself to get better. There is this understanding that these things have a relationship and these things fit together. And so we're going to be discussing today where we are and how we get or move along this continuum between leading and learning. I'm going to lead in, if you give me a minute, to the first question by showing a couple of diagrams that come from the article, Leading is Learning. And I think it sort of outlines what we're trying to get to in this talk and understand how these things relate to each other. So from the article, we've started off seeing learning then moving on to leading. So one comes before the other, where these two things are fairly separate. And that I truly believe was more of the older style of leadership. You would learn the skills, the attributes, the duties, the management, and then you would go on and do it. And in fact, much of our schooling used to be like that. You would learn the content, the facts, you would pass, and then you would move on to actually the doing of these things. And what we've seen both in schools, but also in leadership, is these two circles are coming together. Whereas leading used to be seen as the same or joined together. And in the last couple of years, and maybe it was before this, but before my time, but I've noticed it more, that it's becoming more that leading is as learning and learning as leading. These things are becoming more and more similar, where we get to a point where I believe we're trying to get to, as I mentioned earlier on, where these two entities is really seen as the same thing. I know that I've been sort of jumbling up a few of my learnings and jumbling up a few of my leadings, but hopefully you get the point. So I'm going to open the first question. We've got 3 people here who work with leaders consistently. And it's one thing for us to talk about leaders, but where do you find the leaders that you're working with are along this path? And I'm gonna throw it over to Ali to start us off, and then I'm gonna see what others think as well. So where do you find your leaders on this path, Ali?
So I love this visual, Sean, because first and foremost, it assumes that all of like both of these components, the leading and the learning, both play an integral role, right? So I think unfortunately, when I'm working with some of my leaders, there's a difference between what they want, what they need, and what they're actually doing. So I often find that leaders want to be learning more. That's something that tends to fall by the wayside for a number of different factors, whether it's operating with that sense of urgency rather than really kind of recentering on what's important. What they probably need to be doing is sort of the fourth version of this, right? That leading or learning is leading and leading is learning. But what we often find them doing is managing because our field continues to evolve and shift and the demands, add on where I don't know that, we talked about the importance of reflection earlier. I don't know if they have the time and the space to step back and figure out how to be a really intentional leader in the midst of all of that management. And, Pete talked about, getting stronger and Alyssa mentioned sort of that aspirational place. And I really feel as though that aspirational place is where learning is leading and leading is learning. I just don't know that many of the leaders with whom I work have an opportunity in terms of time, but also in terms of space to get to that point. So a lot of the work that we do is around goal setting and structured time and disciplined action, really trying to value those different components of the leading and learning processes, because ultimately they're the model learners in their building. And they're the ones that we're turning to, not just for our educators, but for our students to really show what does it mean to fail and get more information and then come back and do it again? What does it mean to gather, new ideas? But the component of this learning, particularly in this space, that I don't want us to overlook is that when we talk about learning and leading, we don't only mean adding new things. A lot of that learning also means having the courage and the focus to determine what older practices aren't serving us well, that we can strip away to make time for the new ones that could be more effective given the constantly shifting needs of our students and our educators.
Yeah, it's a great point. And it echoes what we had Peter DeWitt on a couple of webinars ago talking about slowing down and what can you take off your plate. But it also reminds me of the continuous extra that students are meant to be learning in the classroom. We don't take things off their plate or off what they're supposed to master. We just add on new things, whether it's to do with, artificial intelligence or creativity or anything else, which are all important, but we're piling more and more things on. Pete, does that resonate with you as well?
It totally does. And Ali, I can totally see what you're saying about the leaders that are in that place of managing and just putting pieces together. And part of it is the idea that, and I see this a lot, where the prevailing mindset is that everything's a fire. Everything's a fire that needs to be put out right now. And so when you mentioned, Ali, this idea that leaders they don't have the time or the space to, enjoy that quiet and engage in that reflection, to think through it, that is on this continuum as well, this idea of reflection. the way I interpret this this continuum is the idea of learning. On the far left, you see learning then leading. That's learning in isolation. That's like you go to a classroom session, you go to a workshop, you learn a skill, and then you come back and you implement it, right? And then to the far right, you got the learning is leading, where you're learning as you're going and while it's happening, and the learning is what you're modeling and what you're showing, and it's embedded in that moment. Self-reflection is the same thing. And I've spent the last 20 years studying and writing and speaking and touting and practicing self-reflection as best I can. Same thing. If we want people to have the time and the space to be able to engage in reflection, really the ultimate is you reflect while it's happening. So you're noticing what's working, what's not working, what I need to tweak and change and adapt and make it go differently. For whom is it working? How is it working? You want to be able to do that in the moment. Well, you have to develop those skills first. So there does need to be some place that you learn the skill and then start to slowly incorporate it into your practice. So self-reflection is one of those things I often talk about. You gotta reflect on the commute. You know what? If you take the train, you're in a good spot. If you have a 15-minute commute, there's 15 minutes of reflection. While you're, walking the dog, doing some gardening, washing your hair, which for me and for Sean is a short period of reflection. But you got to have some space to go do that and practice it so that you can use it in the right spot, right? So in the midst of it. And I see the same thing happening here with our professional learning, with adapting to the changes in our educational environment, with the ability to self-reflect, to shift from just managing and putting out fires to actually leading folks and leading the organization forward. That's how I see this continuum playing out. And to put a bow on this little spiel, the thing that I see administrators and leaders all across this continuum, and honestly, the ones on the far left are getting the results you would expect at the far left, which are lower. And then as we move across to the right, you're getting much greater impact in your organization and with your people as you move that direction.
Yeah, and hopefully you're also getting leaders with less burnout, because it seems a little bit ironic that if you can start to do more learning, it's not actually going to create necessarily more work and more stress. And if you can get to a point where you're doing it at the same time, then it just should be something that becomes second nature. I'm going to probably name drop throughout this webinar as well, but when you were talking about self-reflection and doing it in the moment, it reminded me of, we had Brudi Kafele on last time as well, and he would talk about holding the proverbial mirror up to your face, and you need to keep asking yourself not just the nice self-reflection questions like, oh, did I do a good job and did they like me? But am I hitting the points that I want to? Am I reaching the students or the parents or the teachers that I need to? And so, but having that just be part of your craft is what a really good leader should be seeking. Alyssa, how does this relate to you? And then maybe some of the ways that it relates back to the messy leadership as well.
Yeah, well, Pete, when you were talking and you said, fighting fires, like that is such a common phrase that we hear from school leaders everywhere. I'm sure all three of us in our work, right? It's like every day people just feel like they can't get ahead of things because they're just constantly, things are coming at them. And it reminded me of something that one of the leaders that we coached sort of captured the shift that they wanted to make. And the shift was that they wanted to shift from being a leader who spent all of their time putting out fires to a leader who intentionally ignited fires for people to gather at their school.
Nice.
And I kind of love that mental image because I feel like we can all relate to that. Like we were all school leaders. We know what that's like. And when I think about kind of the commonalities around leading and learning and why sometimes people get stuck on the left side of the continuum or, get in this place of stagnation. I think, Allie, you called out some of them. Pete, you called out like time poor, right? Like too much to do on the to-do list, not creating the intentional time and space, as you suggested, Pete, on your commute to reflect. But just really, sometimes I think it's lack of agency. People aren't really sure, like, if I take this new learning on, do I have the agency to do something with it? And so I think it's really interesting for people to kind of think about what there's like what's causing, if they're not getting to the leading and learning being synonymous, like what's causing the stagnation. And then to think about ways to widen that lens, right? If we want to widen our lens, we've got to widen our view. We've got to have new inputs, whether the input be additional reflection or working with a coach or, selecting a great book to read, but really to move to that place of leading and learning, we really have to widen our lens. And that is a very personal thing to take ownership of.
Yeah, I love that idea about agency as well and getting more agency. Peter, you're going to jump in?
I just wanted to say one more thing about fires. I had a principal that I was mentoring who actually had a wildfire come in and he had to evacuate his school. And he told me straight up, he said, Pete, here's the thing about leadership and fires. He says, the only thing that's an actual fire is an actual fire. And in the absence of that, we are telling ourselves a story that we have to go do that thing right now. And that's not always an accurate story. In fact, most of the time, it's an inaccurate story that leads us down a path of frustration and angst. And then, oh my gosh, where'd the day go?
And sometimes to add on to that, when we are fighting those fires, we might actually be impeding somebody else's learning.
True. Very true.
Right? So like everybody's on this journey of learning. And sometimes when we want to save people, we kind of interfere with their learning process. But I love that. The only actual fire is a fire.
Exactly. It makes sense as well. You all touched on this a little bit previously, and Ali, you certainly touched on it because you were talking about the way that you do that your professional learning and professional development that you offer is focusing more on what Alyssa and I would be calling the human side of leadership, the well-being, the whole educator, the way they grow teams, the way they interact. So I'm going to pose this question. We'll start with you again, Ali, but it won't always be. But I want you to think about if leadership has changed, and if so, how, and then to talk a little bit about what you're seeing in the professional learning, professional leadership realm to see if it's really kept up or if it's still stuck in that management side of professional learning.
So leadership has definitely changed, right? In the same way that teachers right now are describing some of the shifts that they're seeing in their classrooms around increasing student needs and family needs. Obviously, at the school and the district level, those needs are going to augment as well. I think part of the challenge, as you noted, Sean, is that professional learning hasn't caught up. We're continuing to think about sort of those traditional topics of fiscal management and long-term planning and personnel. Our personnel force looks completely different now than it did 15 years ago. So really having the courage to say, you know what, these were the right topics and the right things 10, 15, 20 years ago, and they served us well in that moment. But it's also okay to give ourselves permission as leaders and as professional learning facilitators to say, they're not the right things now. They're not meeting our student needs, our educator needs, our community needs. And having the ability then to pivot and really think critically about what some of those content-based and leadership skill ideas and topics continue to resonate. But then also, as you noted, what are some more of the more human-based components that need to be taking a greater role front and center within our professional learning spaces? One of the things, we always say we hate role plays when we're in some of these professional learning sessions, but that's something that, believe it or not, I'm seeing resonate more and more with leaders in a way that it didn't previously, because they're really struggling with those human to human interactions. They're becoming that much more challenging than perhaps what many of us had to deal with before. So making space, whether that's in a role play or time to think about areas of personal growth, or even the ability to dig deep into a skill that you need to personally develop, I think needs to take a much more prominent role in the professional learning space for our leaders than it ever has previously.
Yeah, more than role playing, I dislike icebreakers, but that's just my personal problem with that one. But whenever we do an icebreaker, I always sort of grudgingly accept that, I really don't like that, but yeah, it worked. I do know these people. Things I don't want to know about these people, but yeah, it worked.
No,
Well,
I've banned all the icebreakers, Sean. You're icing people out. I'm all about like inclusion activities now, right? Like how do
Okay.
we draw them in on a safe and level playing field to continue that dialogue? Because you don't want to be putting people out from the very first step.
All right.
yeah,
Alyssa,
I
go
was gonna
ahead.
say the same. I'm not gonna steal your thunder, Alyssa.
Steal my thunder, Pete.
I just want to take a moment to address that thing with icebreaker because I know that Allie would have some thoughts about icebreakers. The whole idea, an icebreaker can't be a separate thing, like just some goofy thing that you do that's not connected to the learning. If it's connected to the learning somehow and it preps people for the learning and it gets us to flick our switches on, like, oh, I can't wait to learn this now.
Yeah.
That's great. Then absolutely do that. And so that's one of the challenges that I've taken because that's what I do is professional development. And I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how am I going to launch this in a way that is captivating to people and makes them want more, as opposed to getting half the people to be like, oh, I need to go get another cup of coffee, or I need to use the restroom, I need to put coins in my car. So it definitely has to have a
and a way to
very
introduce
clear
people
purpose.
into the topic that you're talking about,
Right.
to grab their interest.
Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's just goofy. Remind me later if we have time to tell you the analysis of Robin Williams jumping up on the table in Dead Poet Society, Captain My Captain. There's a whole story about that. Anyway, Alyssa, you were going to say?
No,
Well,
I was. Thanks, Pete. I was going to build off what you were saying, Allie, and yeah, I think we all know. And David in chat, was saying that he sees leading changing, that it's more side by side leading and less top down. I think that's very true. I also think that what we expect from leaders has changed. 10, 15 years ago, we wanted the leader to be out front, have all of the answers, just tell me what to do, just give me some directives. That's not. And what we found in our research is that's not actually what people want in a leader. They don't want a leader who is hiding behind a professional veneer and pretending to know everything. That what we found in our messy leadership research is like the most effective leaders are the leaders that, lead from a place of authenticity and vulnerability, are willing to stand up and say, I don't know, but we can go discover this together. Now, this doesn't mean that they're not walking around with no answers, but I think that authenticity, that vulnerability, and people want to connect with their leaders. They want to know them, not just behind this professional veneer, but as people too. And I think that's a shift. I think that's definitely a shift in the school leadership world, and one that's not always as easy for younger leaders to navigate. So I think that's an area, to develop those, as Sean would call them, the human side, the human skills of leadership, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
if I could just feed off of that just for a second, one of the things that can give you a hint as to how somebody is going about their leading is ask them, you're a leader? What do tell me more about your leadership. What do you lead? And hear if the person says, well, I lead a school, or I lead an organization, or I lead this team. That's different than saying I lead these people, these human beings. And it's akin to the conversation we have a lot about teachers. Like, what do you teach? And you have the person that says, well, I teach biology, as opposed to I teach 9-year-olds.
Yeah.
It's that mindset of what are you actually doing? And so there clearly was a time for all the B's, right? The buses, the budgets, the bills, the butts and seats, right? You had all that, and that there has a place. The reality is you're not leading a school. You're leading a bunch of people that gather under a single roof that happen to go to or work in that school. And that's different. And so we need to take that into account when we engage in our professional learning, that it's not just about skills, it's about learning how to navigate humans. And that's complex, and that's different, and that's harder than going through well, this is how you facilitate a team meeting. It's harder than that.
And Pete, if I can just, yes, you're like speaking my language. And that's usually the transition that most new leaders have the hardest time making, because in education, we're set up to like progress from teacher into, right, a leading position, whether that be, you know, whatever level. But we are all strong in the teaching realm, or strong in content and pedagogy and knowing how to teach. And then we find ourselves in leadership positions, and there's not usually a lot of leadership development around how do you inspire people? How do you empower people? How do you create a shared vision and get people, like, those are the skills that we really focus on in BTS, Spark, but they're just not usually a part of sort of that training and development program for leaders.
And here's one other thing that I found that complicates the matter for us, to answer the question that's on the screen, why not, is that think about our profession, this profession of education is very much institutionalized. And so when you think about how most new teachers teach, they taught the way they were taught. Mm-hmm. And so then when you become a leader, you lead the way you were led. And for the most part, this is the part that gets where we get in our own way. Most of us, so the people on the chat, the people on the panel, most educators, we're probably pretty good students. The box of school, we fit in pretty well. We got our points, we got our grades, we figured out how to make it work, and it worked well. And so whatever the teachers were doing clearly worked, because it worked for me, it worked for my peer group. And so when I'm now going to become a teacher, it doesn't matter who my mentor teachers are, it doesn't matter who my master teacher is and my student teaching, I'm more or less going to teach the way I was taught because it works. And if there are kids that it's not working for, there's obviously something wrong with those kids. So then we get into leadership, and the same thing happens. We lead based on the examples that we've seen, and our default is to kind of lead that way. And if we have folks who have historically gone with the budgets, the buses, the buildings, all those B's, then that is our default setting. And it becomes really, really challenging. And like you said, Alyssa, it's really, really challenging for us to make that cognitive shift to say, wait, I'm not leading a school, I'm leading a bunch of people. And that is a necessary step. And just to explain some of the psychology behind it, it really does complicate the matter, which is why, Allie, you do what you do, and you help people see that there's a human being here that needs to grow, not a teacher, not a paraprofessional, not an assistant principal. I'm air quoting like Joey Tribbiani would do. They're human beings first, and then their profession is part of their existence. And we just need to remember that as we're leading people.
One of the questions, Pete, I always pose to leaders in this space is, are you managing a school or are you leading a learning organization? Because there's a real distinction there when we think about how those models operate, right? One's got all the B's like you're talking about, and the other is very much about sort of developing an ecosystem where we learn and we thrive together. So when I think about professional learning and I work with leaders and facilitators, one of the things I keep nudging them past is to think about those sessions not as a staff meeting, but really as a gathering. Like a lot of the folks in the chat box right now are talking about the importance of relationships and community and developing that personal connection first. And Priya Parker has some brilliant work. Her book is The Art of Gathering, but I pull in those pieces all the time when designing my own professional learning sessions, as well as helping others design their experiences, because it is about that connection. It's about really establishing what the purpose is for us to get together. How are we connecting? How am I working as your facilitator and your host, and not just this, information dumper, if you will, in the space, but instead providing those opportunities for social construction so that the learning isn't just about the stuff. It really is, as Alyssa keep mentioning, it's about the people and how important they are in these spaces.
Right. This actually can lead us on to the next question as well, because it talks about what mindsets then, what skills, competencies do we need to be teaching now? And we've touched on a couple of them, but it is so amazing, especially in our work at BTS Spark, that we get leaders who are really proficient in instruction and pedagogy and the management, but they very often have never had any professional learning regarding how to be a great leader. We want teachers to be great at teaching. We should want our leaders to be great at leading. So, who would like to jump in with this one first? What are the mindset, skills, competencies that we need right now then?
I'll do it. Whenever Allie starts, the bar is set so high, it's hard to reach it. But
Yeah, that's a good point.
I'll start with
Yeah.
a low, the first rung on the ladder on this one. I think there's really, when it comes to down to leadership, I like to boil it down to its two most basic elements. So essentially, leaders do two things. And again, this is all about people. So one is we rally everybody towards the common vision for the organization or the team or whatever it is. So this is what Ali was talking about. You gotta know why you're doing what you're doing. You have a clear vision of where you're headed. And we'd have to do that together. That can't be something you're seeing this in the chat right now. If you've opened up your chat and looked through it, it can't be a top-down thing that the leader says, here's my vision for where we're going, and now we're all going to do it. It has to be something that we build together so that everyone has commitment to it, not buy-in. You don't want to buy into someone else's vision. You want commitment to a shared vision. So that's one thing that essentially leaders need to do. The other is then to figure out, how do I get each individual person on this team, in this organization, at this campus, on this faculty? How do I get each individual person to have that commitment and then demonstrate that commitment on a regular basis? So to get them to take a step closer towards that goal, towards that vision of the ideal future. And if you can do those two things, you can lead any organization, any team, in anything. You can learn the nuts and bolts of the work. You have to be able to get people together to work towards the same thing. And then it's that one-on-one, it's that personal, it's that side-by-side, it's that servant leadership. What do you need to be fully committed to this? How can I help you, paddle in that direction with everybody else? And that essentially is what great leaders do. The big umbrella of what great leaders do. I'd love to hear what some of the smaller umbrella pieces might be.
I'm happy to jump in, but I don't know, Sean, if you have a visual of the 33 mindsets that we speak of at BTS Spark. The simplistic umbrella, I think, Pete, works really well. I think the reality is that it sounds easier than it is. And that under each of those like one and two things that you said, there's so many skills, dispositions, and mindsets. BTS Spark, we have a strong point of view. There's 33 of them. We have them very neatly in 4 domains of, B. The B domain is really like, who are you as a leader? How do you show up as a leader, right? Like I think of, I don't know if anybody else is a Brene Brown fan, but like Brene Brown says, who you are is how you lead, right? And so these are the skills and mindsets around your own leadership presence, your authenticity, your vulnerability. I think you have to have those in place. Thank you, Sean, for on the fly bringing this up. So just to touch on the 4 domains, there's 33, mindsets that we believe all leaders need to have to be successful. And as you look at this, you probably think like, I've got some of these dialed in, and then some of the other ones, I could probably use some support, so just looking at them kind of in our 4 quadrants, we have our B, and then moving, I'm going to go counterclockwise, our relate, the blue hexagons. Those are kind of what you were talking about. This is all the relationships with other people. Do you know how to be inclusive in your leadership, how to engage others, how to influence others, how to stretch others, right? These are the skills that you have to lead people. And then moving, clockwise around our think hexagons. These are more the analytical side of leadership, curiosity, student-centric. Are you able to future back thinking? And then our green hexagons are inspire, visioning, values, your own personal purpose, right? Do you know how to lead change? Do you know how to tell a story that captures, heart and mind to bring people along? So we have a very defined point of view, but what's interesting about this, and I think speaks to the books that both of you have written, all 3 of us, our experience, is that over 60% of leaders who are receiving coaching with us, their requests fall in the B and the relate domain, which means they're asking for help from their coaches in those areas. Really interesting to think that that's what they want to work on. Things like, how do I build trust? How do I stretch others? How do I empower other people? It's relational skills. So sorry, Sean, for making you kind of go off on a
No, that's fine.
grab
No,
another slide. Um,
I'm here to help. Yeah. And it's what we call the human side of leadership. And I think it's what both Ali and Pete were talking about as well. You're not talking about providing more content for people. You're talking about how do you make them the best leaders they can be for the people that they're working with. And the thing is, nowadays, it's not just those people in the district office or those people in your the school. It's also the broader community as well, because that boundary between where the school starts and where it finishes is getting grayer and grayer. It's becoming that sort of that community hub as well.
So, Pete, I love that you started with that concept of shared vision and you made the distinction between buy-in and commitment because they are so different, right? Like it, yeah, I could buy into a lot of things that sound good, but like, am I really committed? Like, am I going to show up and do the hard work? And Alyssa, I think that, blueprint that you and Sean and BTS have outlined around those specific skills is so critical because it guides that self-reflection process to say, if this is our shared vision, what are those human skills that I need to develop personally or that I need support developing in order to contribute my part to that shared vision? And one of the things that comes up so often as a skill of need in my work with leaders is this support around nurturing what Dan Coyle would refer to as sort of candor generating practices, right? Having spaces that are safe enough. Alyssa, you mentioned the importance of trust, but having spaces that are safe enough for all members of our school community to be able to say, you know what? Yeah, that's the shared vision, and we're taking some of the steps in the right direction, but we're not there yet. And here are the ways that we need to shift. And that's not just being driven by the leader, but because of that deep commitment, others feel safe and they feel like they can have that conversation that's going to sort of push the needle forward where we need to as a learning organization. So it's about having that shared vision, but then also the trust to be able to engage in some of those crucial conversations that are going to ultimately accelerate progress so that we're not just seeing self-efficacy, but hopefully collective efficacy over time.
Yeah, wonderful. I'm gonna open it up now for people if they want to add some personal questions from the audience. And as they're doing that, I'm going to share with you, these were the mindsets that in the research for the Messy Leadership book, we found by going back and looking at coaching and also discussing issues with some of or problems of practice with some of our coaches. So I'm going to have each of you just respond to this. So these are the kind of mindsets that you're finding there is a need for out there. And I'm going to invite people from the audience to submit some questions as you're doing that.
Sean, are we to interpret that the larger words are the ones that came up more frequently than the smaller words, just so that we're clear on that?
You're clever. Well done.
Okay.
Very intuitive.
Not my first word.
Nothing gets past you, Pete, I tell you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
So are these the things that you find, Pete, when you're doing some of your work with school leaders?
Yeah, and what yes, and there's buy-in. Down at the bottom, that purple one is one that we're just not going to get to today. There's a lot of things that the leaders don't have a clear understanding of. You know what I'm saying? So, for instance, feedback is one. Effective feedback is a process. It's a give and take. It's a back and forth. It's a conversation. And so often you hear leaders say, "Oh, I gave them that feedback." And when, how many people are going to respond positively to someone telling them something that's just quick and like, "Here, go do this. That's just how you do it like this." That's not gonna get us that level of commitment, right? To connect it back. So it's little things like that I have found is that you find folks that are like, "Oh, I'm really good at feedback. I give teachers feedback all the time. I'm in 30 classrooms a week. I give teachers feedback every time I'm in a classroom." They're always getting feedback, but they're not really engaged in any kind of meaningful, actionable relatable feedback that's going to move the needle for them. And so there's a lot of that comes up too. In fact, you could say that about just about every word that's on the screen up here right now. Is there's a wide range of knowledge, understanding, and then therefore application of any of these terms or practices.
Yeah, and just to jump on that with the feedback, it's interesting to me. This really came that the biggest need that leaders had was like help in knowing how to give feedback. And I think your point, Pete, of feedback is a conversation. And the other thing is feedback doesn't imply that it's negative, right? Feedback we should be giving positive feedback in these conversations too. It really is around that feedback. One of the ones that I found really interesting was the feeling of really needing more confidence, at how pervasive that was across leaders globally, regardless of seniority level, of feeling a little bit of like imposter syndrome and not having the confidence they needed to sort of tackle the unknown or to tackle a tough situation. That one was actually really surprising to me. It came up as one of our top 5 needs from leaders, really globally.
So Alyssa, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that was one I was so excited to see like come out prominently in this space, because I think it's like one of those like dirty little secrets that as leaders, because we lack confidence, we don't want to say out loud, right? You mentioned earlier that we're supposed to have this sort of professional veneer and not appear vulnerable in certain situations. But particularly in the professional learning space, I see that lack of confidence contributing to what we often see play out as initiative fatigue. So if we think of kind of Tuckman's model of like, we're going to form and then we're going to storm and then we'll eventually norm, like so often leaders will come up there with that shared vision in the forming stage. And then as soon as staff members start storming, because things get tough and the work is good and it's not easy, we don't always have the confidence to kind of push through to the norming process. So then what happens? We abandon ship and we, go on with the new initiative or the new thing. And then for the educators in our care, it just feels like flavor of the week. So I was actually really, I guess, inspired and hopeful to see that confidence, in those anonymous surveys kind of surface to the top, because I think if leaders are honest, this is something collectively we need to get better at.
Yeah, exactly. We do have a couple of questions I'm going to pose to you before our time runs out. So we talked before about this difference between management mentality and then leadership. And so one question is, how do you change a leader's mindset who is very management driven? So how do you shift them into this space? Who would like to take that?
I'm happy to start that one off. I like to always start with the goal. What are we trying to accomplish here? And when you're management driven, you're looking for particular data points, the things that are measurable, the things that have numbers associated with them and decimal points and that kind of stuff. And those are obviously important in our business. And again, it comes back to the idea of the way to change the bottom line, the way to change the outputs is to change the inputs. And who's doing the inputting? Well, humans. Mm-hmm. So it's part of, and I know what Alyssa's thinking right now. She's like, Pete, you boil everything down and make it sound so easy, but it's so complicated. And the reality is,
I love the simplicity of it, right?
Well, and that's exactly what I try to do. I try to make complicated things sound easy, because when they sound easy, people are like, oh yeah, okay, so let's work on that. And then as we start to dig into it and roll up our sleeves a little bit, we unravel it and realize, oh man, this is super messy. It's super complicated. But it's got to start in a place that is manageable to folks.
100%. And I think it has to start small, and too often in our space of wanting to, with the right reasons, wanting to provide development or opportunities for learning, we give people almost too much instead of like helping them narrow and think, what's the biggest mind shift that you could make right now? And if you're going to make this shift, what are the behaviors you have to change? Because it's really about those small behaviors. So I think I agree with you that like it's not that complicated, but I do think that we could narrow it for folks and help them identify for themselves, like what's one shift? And then if you're going to make the shift, what are the behaviors And then if you change these behaviors, you can start to see, okay, now I'm seeing I'm having a different impact, which leads to different results. But it all starts with like kind of the identification and a small shift.
Yep. Agreed.
Yeah. Excellent. And it also helps, it's one thing to do that on your own, but it also helps if you can do it with somebody as well. They can keep you honest and also, be an outside resource to ask questions, probe, and to move you along as well. This has been fun, so we'll have to do it again sometime.
Hey, Sean, that sounded like a plug for coaching. That's what that sounded like. Like
just a small one. Just a small one.
I'm fully on board with that because I think we could all use coaches. Life is hard and leadership is hard and doing our work is hard and managing a budget is hard and managing our physical vessel is hard. And we need someone there to help us with that. I honestly believe that in every element of our life, we could use somebody that is just fully in our corner saying, I got you, you got this, we can do it together. So you can plug having a coach and I will fully endorse that all day.
Exactly. And it's also, if we understand that learning and leading are the same thing, then you're going to need to have someone who is helping you on that. You don't become a professional footballer by learning the basics in elementary school and then you never have any coaches ever again for the rest of your career. It's not going to work. Message from our sponsors. The good thing is the sponsors are us. So, Ali, where can people find you or your book?
I would love to connect with folks on my website, www.thelearningloop.com, as well as at The Learning Loop on social. And the new book is out. It's been out for 2 months now. So I've been super excited to get it into folks' hands and also just hear how they're processing some of those different tools in their learning spaces.
Okay, fantastic.
And Ali, why don't you, as we're all sharing, make sure to put it in chat too, so people can just click on links.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yeah.
Great minds think alike, and we'll add it also to the email that goes out. Pete, what about you? You're not in Houston all the time, are you?
Hang on, sorry about that. I was trying to type. I was trying to follow Alyssa's suggestion and type stuff, and being able to multitask, it turns out, is a misnomer. You can't do that. You can switch task. It's called switch tasking. But you can't multitask. Our brains are only are able to program one thing at a time. Anyway, so my work stuff is educationhall.com, where you can find me, and my Twitter handle or X handle, that just sounds weird, is at Education Hall. And then my new book is available at strivess.com. I'll throw the link in the chat there as well. And as Ali posted a minute ago, thanks for the plug, Ali. I have written some books on instructional coaching and leadership in addition to this self-help / social psychology book. strivess.com. That's a coaching organization that I run, Strive Success Solutions / the book. And I'm going to type that in.
All right, type it in and we'll add it to the email that goes out.
Whoops, I only sent it to Ali. Oh,
there you go.
I'll get it squared away.
Alyssa.
I already own it. I wouldn't have endorsed it if it wasn't good.
Oh, that's awesome. You can find more about messy leadership and the work we do at BTS Spark, btsspark.org, or reach out to Sean or myself. And yes, P, of course, our point of view is everyone needs a coach. But what I would say is, even outside of that, what I believe people need is they do need somebody cheering them on in a leadership role that is with outside of their organization. Yeah. So it doesn't have to, I think it should be a coach. It doesn't have to be a coach, but it does need to be somebody who can push your thinking, that is a confidential source outside and has an outside perspective of your school, your district. That sometimes is just too close.
Yeah. And maybe someone who is skilled at leadership and not necessarily skilled at, managing a school, just putting it out there. Yeah, there's a QR code as well on the screen if anyone's interested about finding out more about the work that we do at BTS Spark. But you know what? We could have drawn a Venn diagram at the end here because I think the work that all three of us are doing, I'm including myself with Alyssa, is so similar and so focused on the same mindsets and same needs. It's just been a really fun conversation. I'm going to end up very briefly. Here is the slide that Alyssa was talking about before. I didn't want to jump too far ahead. that outlines our framework. And as she was saying as well, most of our work tends to focus on that relate and on that be. But you also need to understand the different ways of thinking, and also ways that you get a shared purpose and inspire your teams at the same time. I gave you some links earlier on. This recording will be up on our YouTube site very soon. We're going to give you an email when it comes out, but if anybody wants to find out where our website is, it's there, it's on YouTube. And if you want to sign up for updates, you are more than welcome as well.